When I got married, I never revealed I'd inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother. And thank goodness I stayed silent, because only a week later my mother-in-law arrived with a notary. Can you imagine finding yourself in a situation where the person you just promised forever to, and their entire family, tries to corner you into signing away your future, literally a week after your wedding? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And thank God I had a secret, a huge one, that saved my financial independence and, honestly, my marriage. It was barely a week after the wedding, and Nathan and I were still floating on cloud 9. Late nights, endless talks, just soaking in that newlywed bliss. The doorbell practically ripped me out of my romantic haze. I mean, who in their right mind knocks like that at 10 a.m.? I threw on a towel, wiped my hands, and rushed to the door, muttering about early birds. But before I could even turn the lock, there she was, Margaret Thompson, my mother-in-law, standing there like a general inspecting troops. Impeccably dressed in a sharp pantsuit, hair styled perfectly, and a look on her face that could curdle milk. And right beside her, a nervous, short man clutching a leather briefcase, clearly a notary or a lawyer. "Victoria," Margaret announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Hello, dear. We need to talk. This is Samuel Wilson, a family friend and notary. I decided it's time to sort out a few things." My heart plummeted. Sort out what? I thought, my stomach twisting into a knot. What could possibly be so urgent a mere 7 days after I said I do? My mind raced, panicking about the secret I'd been keeping, the 3 apartments my grandmother had left me. 3 incredible properties in different parts of the city. I hadn't told a soul, not even Nathan. It wasn't about being greedy. It was about protecting what was mine and making sure Nathan loved me, not my square footage. I wanted our relationship to be pure, untainted by money. "Good morning, Margaret," I managed, forcing a cheerful tone as I let them into the apartment Nathan and I now shared. "Come in, Samuel. Nice to meet you." I tried to project calm, but my nerves were screaming. Was she here to make me sign a promissory note? A prenup? This felt like a trap. Margaret marched in, immediately scanning the apartment as if she owned it. Then she gestured sharply, "Victoria, seat the guest." I instinctively moved to the kitchen to make tea and grab some cookies, even though I wanted nothing more than to tell them both to leave. Basic hospitality, I guess. "Victoria, where's Nathan?" "I asked him to be home," she demanded from the couch. "He just stepped out. He'll be back soon." I lied, knowing he'd only gone to the store and would be back in 20 minutes. I desperately needed time to figure out her game. As I poured the tea, Margaret continued her inspection. "Things still aren't quite in order here. Young couples never understand how to keep a proper home, but we'll fix that later." I bit my tongue, forcing a tight smile as I set her cup down. Then came the hammer blow. "Victoria," she said, her tone suddenly formal. "Nathan's father and I thought that now you're part of the family, it's time to take care of some paperwork. You are married now, yes? We just want to avoid any future issues regarding property. Samuel has prepared some documents. We believe it's important to be fair and transparent." I froze. This was it. They wanted me to sign something right now. "What kind of documents, Margaret? What exactly are we talking about?" I asked, trying to sound as innocent as possible. "Oh, nothing major," she replied, far too casually. "Just a prenuptial agreement and a note confirming that if something ever happens, any property gained during the marriage will be split evenly. We also wanted to clarify, just to be sure, that you didn't have any significant assets before the wedding." My heart hammered against my ribs. There it is. She was fishing. But I was ready. I'd always suspected she wouldn't be able to resist poking into my private life. "Oh, assets." I smiled sweetly. "Well, I saved a bit for the wedding, have a few small savings. Nothing major, really." "I see," she said, her eyes narrowing. I could tell she didn't believe me. "And what about property? Did you own anything before the marriage? You people are really nosy," I almost blurted out. Instead, I gently shook my head. "No, nothing serious. I used to live with my grandmother, that's all. But she passed away a while ago, and the apartment was small. It went to my parents." I bit my lip, omitting the crucial detail. That apartment did go to my parents, but the other 3, the nicer ones my grandmother had bought during her successful business days, those were left to me in her will. Only her notary knew, and I had specifically asked him to keep it confidential. So nothing, Margaret repeated, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if someone plain like me couldn't possibly have married her son. Well, then all good. Samuel, show her the agreement. I took the papers from the notary. I skimmed the prenup, jointly acquired property in case of divorce, typical stuff. But one clause jumped out, a viper in the grass. If one spouse is later found to have significant assets, those assets will be considered joint property unless specifically stated otherwise as premarital. In other words, they were trying to corner me. If I said I had nothing, then anything discovered later would automatically become joint. But if I declared my assets now, I'd be exposing my secret to Margaret. I pretended to read the document carefully while Margaret droned on. Nathan's a good boy, but you know how unpredictable life can be. And you, dear, come from a modest background. Why complicate things? That's why we decided to handle this now, to avoid any arguments later. Anger boiled inside me. To her, I was just some simple girl and nobody. If I told her the truth about my 3 rented-out apartments and comfortable monthly income, she'd never let it go. She'd probably demand I sign them over to the family or offer them to relatives at a discount. More than anything, I didn't want to ruin things with Nathan. He had no idea I was wealthy, and I truly believed he loved me for me. I need to talk to Nathan first, I said firmly, handing the papers back to the notary. I'm not signing anything without him. Margaret bit her lip, but quickly composed herself. Of course, talk to your husband, but I'm sure he agrees with me. This is for your own peace of mind. Right, Samuel? The notary nodded awkwardly, checking his watch. If we're signing today, we'll need to do it before lunch. I have other meetings. Just then, the door creaked open, and Nathan walked in, carrying a grocery bag. He raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw his mom and the notary. Mom, what's going on here? He set the bag down and looked at me, a question in his eyes. Victoria, what's happening? I just raised my hand slightly, as if to say, don't ask me. I'm just as shocked. That's when Margaret launched into her carefully crafted explanation, telling Nathan she was just looking out for his future, that it made sense to sign a prenup and sort out all financial matters right away. Nathan listened, his face tense. When she finally finished, he spoke quietly but firmly. Mom, I asked you not to get involved in our relationship. Victoria is my wife, and we'll handle things ourselves. Margaret gasped. Nathan, how can you not see these days? You have to be careful. What if Victoria has hidden debts, or worse, some unknown fortune that suddenly comes to light? It's better to sort it all out now. He glanced at me, trying to read my face for clues about this hidden fortune. I did my best to stay calm, though my heart was pounding. If Victoria has something, I honestly don't care, Nathan finally said. I love her, not her money. And Mom, seriously enough. Margaret pouted, clearly offended, but accepted her defeat. Fine, do what you want. Samuel, sorry to waste your time. She stood and headed for the door. The notary got up, shrugged awkwardly, and followed her out. The relief that washed over me when the door clicked shut was immense. Nathan came over and hugged me tight. I'm sorry she acted like that. It's okay, I said, trying to be diplomatic. I get it. She's just worried. She wants you to have stability and security. But deep down, I had made a firm decision. I wouldn't tell anyone about the 3 apartments. Not yet. Keeping quiet was definitely the right move. And that's how our married life began, with a not-so-subtle warning shot from my mother-in-law. It was just the beginning of a long and messy family saga. Margaret wasn't planning to back off anytime soon. She was determined to control everything. Our family, our finances, even what happened inside our home. Her attitude toward me swung back and forth. One day she'd be sweet, bringing flowers, inviting us to dinner. The next, she'd lash out, criticizing every little thing I did. To tell this story properly, and believe me, there's a lot more to it, you need to know that every chapter of our family life played out like a scene from a never-ending soap opera. And like any good soap opera, it was all about secrets, drama, and messy emotions. And yes, I had a major secret. The apartments my grandmother left me. My life before Nathan was pretty normal. I grew up in a family of engineers, my dad an electrician, my mom a design engineer. We weren't rich, but we got by. I studied economics at university and worked part-time. My family was easygoing, especially my grandmother. She raised me to be independent and confident, always telling me I could achieve anything. She was a unique woman. Back when times were tough, she and my grandfather did all sorts of side hustles. When the economy picked up, she started a small business, buying cheap apartments, renting some out, flipping others. She had a sixth sense for real estate and a bit of luck. Toward the end of her life, she decided to make a will, but she kept it secret from everyone. My parents didn't approve of her past, gray area business tactics, so their relationship was strained. But she loved and trusted me. A week before she passed, knowing her time was short, she asked me to meet with her notary. There I signed the documents, making me the sole heir to 3 apartments. The will stated I could only take ownership after her death. After she passed, I followed all legal procedures and officially inherited the properties. But I didn't tell anyone. There was no need. My parents thought the apartments had been sold or left to someone else. I think my grandmother wanted to avoid drama and infighting. And honestly, I think she was right. She left them to me because she believed I'd manage them wisely and wouldn't let them become the cause of family tension. But the real test of that secret came after I got married. My grandmother had warned me, sharp as ever, that nothing threatens an inheritance more than greedy in-laws. I used to laugh, thinking she was exaggerating. Greedy? Come on. People aren't like that. They'll understand. It's mine. But now, looking at Margaret, I was starting to realize my grandmother was absolutely right. I met Nathan in my second year of university. He was a physics grad student, smart, passionate, and despite being a theoretical physicist, athletic and charming. We became close, started dating. He was incredibly gentle, caring, always joking that I was his muse. I saw how he treated his mother with deep respect. His dad was in the military, often away, so Margaret had raised Nathan on her own. He saw her as a saint. So, I understood Margaret was a central figure in his life. What I underestimated was just how much she would try to control it. We dated for a long time before deciding to get married. Even during the wedding planning, Margaret was overly involved, insisting on how my hair should look, which flowers to pick, where to order the cake. I pushed back, stuck to my vision. The wedding turned out beautiful, but her presence loomed over everything. Still, I didn't argue. I figured what mattered most was love and mutual respect with Nathan. After the wedding, we moved into the apartment his parents had given us. It had actually been bought by his father years ago and was still in his name. It was a nice 2-bedroom place, recently renovated, very comfortable, but I never felt like it was truly ours. His parents still had keys. Margaret would walk in unannounced, claiming she just came by to drop off pies or water the plants. I tried to stay polite, but deep down, I wanted a space that was truly ours, somewhere we made the rules. Still, I held back from suggesting an alternative. After all, I had options, those 3 apartments. But imagine me saying, "Hey, Nathan, let's move into one of my places. I never showed them to you, but I've got a few apartments." That would raise 1,000 questions. And I wasn't sure how Nathan would react. What if he thought I'd been hiding something? What if he got upset? Not to mention Margaret, who'd surely go into overdrive the moment she sensed I had a way out of her reach. So I waited. Then came that visit with the notary, just 1 week after the wedding. My secret almost slipped out, but I managed to keep it hidden thanks to staying quiet. Nathan took it in stride. He even said he didn't need a prenup. We love each other. I'm not planning on getting divorced, so why worry about splitting assets? He even joked, if Mom's so worried, maybe she should sign a prenup with Dad. We laughed it off and decided to live our lives, ignoring Margaret's odd behavior. But she didn't stop. She started showing up more often, nitpicking everything. Why are there dirty dishes in the sink? Where were you walking around till midnight? I tried to stay polite, but sometimes I couldn't hold back. Nathan felt the tension and did his best to smooth things over. But one day, something happened that really stood out. Nathan was at work. I was home, studying for a training program. I'd recently landed a job at a consulting firm, but it required extra certification. Margaret showed up unannounced, glanced around, and sat down in the kitchen, staring at me. "Victoria, you do realize you won't be able to live on just Nathan's salary, right?" Why not? I looked up from my laptop. I work too. The pay is not amazing yet, but it'll grow with time. She shook her head. But you're still studying, aren't you? Just some extra training, and who knows when you'll actually start making good money. Meanwhile, you have to run a household, think about the future, about children, and everything else. Well, I figured we'd manage, I said, trying to stay calm. It's just the two of us for now. The money we have is enough. And if anything comes up, my parents are happy to help. Your parents? She raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. Well, maybe, but they're not exactly well off, are they? I stayed quiet. My parents weren't exactly rich, especially compared to Nathan's father, who had a military rank, a solid pension, and some decent savings. But I didn't want to agree with Margaret out loud. That would only give her more reason to look down on me. Margaret, I said, the name slipping out naturally. She always insisted I call her that. After all, I'm your second mom. We'll figure things out when the time comes. Okay. Please don't worry so much. Oh, everything seems so simple to your generation, she sighed, pulling her cup of tea closer. But you have to plan ahead. You can't just let life run its course. Take this apartment, for example. She motioned around. Sure, it's in my husband's name, but sooner or later, it'll belong to Nathan. And in case of a divorce, why are you jumping straight to divorce? I snapped, unable to hold it in. We just got married. I'm not implying anything. Life is unpredictable. Anything can happen. Do you two have any finances, property? Where would that come from? I shrugged. I'm only 23. I just started working. Right. But what if your grandmother left you something? I heard she had money. A chill ran through me. Left you something. Sounded like a bait. A test to get me to admit the truth. I closed my laptop and looked her straight in the eye. My grandmother left us warm memories and a few family keepsakes, some furniture and clothing. That's all, I said, quiet but firm. I see. She dragged out the words like she didn't quite believe me. I was just wondering. People said your grandmother was quite the businesswoman. I figured she must have stashed something away. If she did, we know nothing about it. I lied with a straight face. She studied me carefully, trying to catch the slightest tremor in my voice or doubt in my eyes. But I'd already learned how to answer these kinds of questions without flinching. Well, if you say so, she finally said, standing up. Tell Nathan I stopped by. Ask him to call me. Once she left, I let out a sigh of relief. Yet again, I was reminded that telling her about the apartments would be like handing her a loaded weapon, something she'd use to constantly intrude and control. A few more weeks passed, and life slowly fell into a routine. I went to work. Nathan worked at the university. We mostly saw each other in the evenings, tired but happy. Everything was fine, except Margaret still showed up unexpectedly to check in. But Nathan stood his ground, telling her we'd handle things ourselves, and that she needed to respect our boundaries. One evening over dinner, we decided to talk about the future. Nathan, what would you think about us renting our own place? I asked gently. But we're already living in our apartment. Why pay rent? He replied, surprised. Is this because of Mom? Not just that. I just want to feel independent. Like we have our own space, something that doesn't come with your father's name on the deed. I get that, Nathan said, twirling his fork in thought. But think about it. Renting a decent place is what? At least 25 to 30, maybe even 50,000 a month. More if we want something renovated. That could drain us. Either that or we take a mortgage, but we don't have a down payment yet. What if I could find the money or the space? The words slipped out before I could stop them. You. He smiled. What? Did you win the lottery, or are you asking your parents? Well, I caught myself. I couldn't just blurt out the truth. I might ruin everything. Just a thought. But if we had the means, would you want to move? Yeah, I think I would. I get that the setup doesn't feel right for you always being watched. But for now, it's just wishful thinking. We're not rich yet. I nodded and said nothing. I thought, what if I just told him about the inheritance? Showed him one of the apartments. Said I'd gotten it recently? Maybe it's time to be honest. But then I remembered how much he admired his mother. Her constant questions, her unannounced visits, her need to control everything. No, not yet. In any good family drama, Timing is everything, and a little mystery never hurts. That's when another character entered the picture, my cousin Elizabeth. She was 27, already divorced, lived on her own, and worked for a big interior design firm. One day, she called and said, "Hey, Victoria, I'm going to be near your place for a project. Mind if I stop by for tea?" "Of course. Come by," I said, glad for the company. I needed to talk to someone. I hadn't told Elizabeth about the apartments either, but at least she wasn't obsessed with me like Margaret. She came over that evening. We had tea in the kitchen, and she looked around our small but cozy home, asking how things were going after the wedding. I gave her vague answers at first, but then I couldn't hold it in. "Let me ask you something," I said. "Do you think a wife should always tell her husband if she owns something personal?" Elizabeth snorted. "Depends on what it is. If it's a childhood teddy bear, no. But if we're talking real estate or a lot of money, then yeah, in a marriage, honesty matters. Otherwise, there will be drama. What if I'm scared he'll tell his mom?" She laughed. "Oh, that's what this is about. The infamous mother-in-law. Yeah, I get it. If you want to keep it from her, but still be honest with your husband, that's tricky. Maybe you can tell Nathan you have some property, but ask him to keep it private. You think that would work? Depends. Is he more loyal to you or his mom? That's what you have to figure out. So, do you actually have something?" "Just a small thing," I dodged. "A mortgage on a garage," I added randomly so I wouldn't look too suspicious. Elizabeth shook her head but didn't push. After she left, I kept thinking about what she'd said. Telling Nathan would mean asking him to keep something from his mother, something serious. And knowing Margaret, that would put him in an impossible position. Wife wants secrecy. Mom demands the truth. He'd be stuck in the middle. No, better to wait. All this tension around the inheritance was starting to affect our relationship. Nathan was distant, quiet, coming home with a cloud over his head. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. "Nathan, what's going on with you? It feels like you're hiding something from me." "There is something," he said, and my blood ran cold. For a second, I thought he already knew about the apartments. "It's Mom. She keeps pressuring me to convince you to sign a prenup. She calls every day, saying it's for the best, but I'm tired of explaining to her that we don't need it." "Why won't she let it go?" I said, relieved it wasn't about the secret. "Just tell her we're not planning on getting divorced." "I try, but she thinks since you don't come from money, you have nothing to lose. And if we split up, you'll try to take everything." "That's insane," I snapped. "I don't want anything." "I know, but she thinks it's about protecting me and our family." "Maybe I should just sign it," I offered, remembering the clause about declaring assets now. "No," Nathan said, shaking his head. "I don't want that. It doesn't sit right with me. But what if it would at least calm her down?" "It won't. She'll just find something else to obsess over." We hugged. I could feel how torn he was. He loved me, but he didn't want to fight with his mom. And I was caught in my own storm. Should I hide the inheritance or not? Maybe I should just sign the prenup and write down that I have no property that might get Margaret off my back. But part of me resisted. What if the truth came out later? Would they accuse me of lying? I honestly didn't know what to do. A couple of months had passed since the wedding. Margaret, clearly tired of pushing us directly, decided to change tactics. She started stirring the pot within the family, dragging Nathan's father and a handful of relatives into the mix. Suddenly, there were all these family dinners with aunts and cousins, all dropping subtle hints about how young couples should focus on the greater good, not just their personal desires. At one of these dinners, I felt like I was under a spotlight, every glance slicing right through me. Nathan's Aunt Irene sat across the table, asking strange questions. "Victoria, you studied economics, right? Our whole family's full of engineers. And then there's you, a humanities person." "Yes, I majored in economics." I nodded, knowing full well it wasn't technically humanities, but I didn't feel like correcting her. "So you're good with money? That degree won't go to waste." There was something mocking in her tone. "I hope not. Have you ever thought about using your knowledge to boost the family's income? Like, say, investing in real estate?" I almost choked on my salad when she said real estate. Has Margaret already been whispering her suspicions to Auntie? I thought, trying to stay calm. I answered, Well, I don't exactly have that kind of capital lying around to jump into real estate, and we just got married, so we're a bit tight on cash. And Irene replied slowly. But maybe your grandmother left something behind. I heard she was quite resourceful. Maybe, Margaret chimed in. But Victoria claims she didn't inherit anything. I pretended not to notice the bite in her voice and smiled as politely as I could. Oh, if only I'd invest in the stock market, or maybe buy a little apartment to rent out. But for now, that's just a dream. Nathan sat beside me, growing more and more tense by the minute. It was obvious he hated how his family was cornering me like this. Finally, he'd had enough. Can we please change the subject? These constant comments about money and grandmas are getting old. Victoria's my wife. If she doesn't have anything, stop pestering her. And if she does, I'm sure I'd already know. Enough. The room fell into awkward silence. Margaret looked offended. The rest of the relatives started whispering. I felt like the odd one out again. But deep down, I was proud. Nathan had stood up for me. Still, one small victory wasn't enough to win the war. Margaret wasn't done. This time, she launched a whole scheme. One of the apartments I'd inherited from my grandmother was in a high-end part of town. The other two were more modest, but that special one, Grandma had snagged it at a bargain, then paid for a full luxury renovation. I'd been renting it out carefully, always through legal agreements, picking reliable tenants. Then one day, the tenant told me she was moving out. Her circumstances had changed, and she couldn't afford the high rent anymore. I needed to find someone new. Quietly, I reached out to the realtor my grandmother used to work with. He got to work looking for a good match. And then, pure coincidence or a setup, I still don't know, Margaret and my father-in-law suddenly started talking about finding a bigger place. They said they had some savings and were exploring options to upgrade. I kept my mouth shut, pretending I had nothing to contribute. Then Nathan said, "Hey, Mom, there are some great new places near Madison Avenue. I saw some listings might be worth checking out." Madison Avenue? That's an expensive area, Margaret gasped. Yeah, but it's a good investment. If you're thinking of upgrading. I froze. That's exactly where my luxury apartment was. Please don't let them come across my rental listing. I prayed, hoping my name wouldn't appear anywhere public. But I was too naive. I hadn't considered that the realtor might unknowingly send info to someone who knew me. And that's exactly what happened. He sent a photo of the apartment's gorgeous living room with its big window and park view to a potential renter who apparently shared it with Margaret. She recognized the furniture. Worse, the address. She vaguely remembered that Grandma used to live on Madison Avenue. That was enough to spark suspicion. Still unsure, Margaret asked a friend to schedule a viewing and take her along. They went. The realtor greeted them, led them into the apartment. Margaret immediately recognized the interior, familiar decor, family photos I hadn't yet taken down. She walked through the rooms, soaking in every clue. When they left, she asked the realtor directly, "Who owns this apartment?" "I represent the owner," he said carefully. "We're renting it out legally." But Margaret was relentless. Maybe she offered him a little bonus, or maybe she just wore him down. But eventually, he slipped. He told her it belonged to a young woman named Victoria, inherited from her grandmother. That was all Margaret needed. The realtor called me afterward to give me a heads up. "Victoria, a woman came by today asking questions. I didn't give away too much, but she figured out it's your apartment. You might want to be ready for some follow-up." I felt the floor drop out from under me. So that's it. She knows. And she won't stop at just one. That evening when Nathan got home, I was sitting in the kitchen, anxious and uneasy. I knew I had to tell him. It was better coming from me than from his mother. She twisted any way she wanted. "Nathan, there's something I need to tell you," I began. "I've been putting it off, but I think it's time. I own an apartment. Actually 3. He froze, his hand still on his coffee mug. 3, he repeated, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. Yeah, 3. My grandmother was into real estate. When she passed, everything came to me. I didn't say anything, because I was afraid your mom would turn it into a problem. "Wow," he said, sitting there in silence. "How long have you known?" "Since she died?" "It's been about a year. Everything's legal. I rent them out and earn income. Why didn't you tell me before? Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought you'd understand, but I was scared of how your mom would react. You know how she is. I didn't want her trying to interfere, or demanding I hand anything over, or pushing us to make it part of the family's assets. I just didn't want our relationship to be about money. Nathan stared at me for a moment, then stood up and pulled me into a tight hug. You're such a fool, Victoria, he said with a relieved smile. But you're my fool. Yeah, I wish you'd told me sooner. But I get it. You're right about my mom. And I'm guessing she's already figured it out, which is why you're telling me now. I nodded and told him the whole story with the realtor. I see. Nathan sighed. All right, consider it forgiven. But no more secrets, okay? I promise, I said, wiping my tears. So, what do you plan to do with the apartments? Keep renting them out? We can always use the extra income, or maybe sell one, and finally buy something for ourselves. We'll talk about it. Nathan sat back down, rubbing his temples. What about my mom? She's going to throw a fit, probably, but we'll handle it. He smiled. Yeah, together we can handle anything. In that moment, I realized I loved him even more than before. Maybe hiding the inheritance had been a mistake. But at least now we were united against outside pressure. Our bond had grown stronger, if only for that evening. But Margaret wouldn't be Margaret if she gave up that easily. The very next day, she called Nathan and demanded that we come over to their house. She said she had something important to discuss. We already knew that important meant a lecture and most likely more blame thrown my way. Still, we decided to go, just to finally put everything out in the open. When we arrived, Margaret was sitting in the living room with Nathan's dad and, of course, Aunt Irene. Clearly, this was meant to be a family tribunal. We greeted everyone, and I tried to act confident, even though I was shaking inside. Margaret gave me a cold stare and opened with, Victoria, we found out that you own 3 apartments, she said, like an inquisitor unveiling a crime. And you've been hiding this from us? Yes, I do, I replied calmly. So what? It's an inheritance, personal property I received before the marriage. But why did you lie? Aunt Irene jumped in. We asked several times, and you said you had nothing. I didn't lie. I just didn't think I was obligated to tell you. I countered. It's personal business. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Well, now it's out in the open, Nathan's dad said, trying to sound more diplomatic. Victoria, you have to understand we're family. Things like this are better shared openly. When I saw how aggressively you were all poking into my and my parents' financial background, I decided silence was safer, I admitted. Yes, it was a mistake, but not a huge one. Not huge, Margaret snapped. Don't you see how this reflects on the whole family? Now people will think you've been deceiving us, or that we're gold diggers. Mom! Nathan stood up. What people? Who cares what anyone thinks? This is between me and Victoria. No one else. No, son. It's not just about you. When you got married, we all became one family. And I don't like that your wife hid 3 apartments. Who knows what else she might be hiding? Maybe she doesn't even plan on having children. Maybe she's just using our family for gain. That was too much. Something inside me snapped. That's outrageous, I exclaimed. What a horrible thing to say. Mom, stop. Nathan raised his voice. That's enough. Yes, Victoria owns some property. That's great. Why can't we just be happy that someone in the family is financially secure? Why does it always have to turn into suspicion? Because she kept it a secret, Margaret insisted. That means she doesn't trust us. And if she doesn't trust us, who knows what else she might do behind our backs? Or maybe it's because we gave her plenty of reasons not to trust us. Nathan's father suddenly chimed in, making the whole room go silent. He looked straight at his wife. Margaret, you've been pushing from the start, dragging notaries into things, forcing prenups. No wonder she kept quiet. So now you're taking her side? Margaret snapped. I'm on the side of common sense, he said. Victoria's choice was questionable, sure, but I understand it. She probably assumed you'd try to dictate how she should use the apartments. And that's exactly what you were planning, wasn't it? Margaret didn't say anything, but her face said it all. Of course, she had wanted control. Of course, she had plans, maybe to sell, reinvest, or decide what was best for the family. But I, Victoria, wasn't giving her that power. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I love Nathan. The apartments were a gift from my grandmother, and what I do with them is my decision. Nathan and I will figure things out together. Maybe one day we'll use the money to buy a home, or we can live in one of them, Nathan offered. Why not? We're a young couple. Exactly. I nodded. We can live there or rent them out. We'll decide together. I'm ready to handle everything properly, but the apartments are mine. I'm not giving them up. I'm sorry, but that's final. But if you use your inheritance to buy a new home, that home becomes marital property, Margaret interjected, showing off her legal knowledge. Which means Nathan has a right to it. So what? I shrugged. He's my husband. Of course, I'd share with him. But what I care about most right now is that no one interferes or tells us what to do. Aunt Irene shook her head. Young people these days are all about independence, and that's exactly what we admire. Nathan's dad nodded. A heavy silence followed. Then Margaret exhaled slowly, like she was finally surrendering. Fine, I won't argue anymore, but understand this. In our family, we've always talked things through. I just don't want your secret properties to come between you two later on. We'll deal with it, Nathan replied. Thanks for your concern. And just like that, the conversation ended. We left shortly after. I caught Margaret watching me with a look of lingering disapproval, but it was clear I wouldn't be bending to her rules, and she would just have to live with that. She wasn't going to stop trying to control us, but I was done playing her game. Life moved on. My career at the consulting firm started to pick up. I got assigned more interesting projects, and my salary was decent. Nathan earned a steady income at the university and took on private tutoring gigs now and then. We were doing well financially, and now that the secret was out, we finally had the freedom to move into one of my apartments and live on our own. No more sharing space with his parents. We chose the most practical one, not the fancy one in the elite district, but the moderately sized, comfortable one that wouldn't draw comments like, "Oh, look at them living like royalty." We did a bit of light remodeling, spent a couple of months bouncing between his parents and mine, and finally moved in. For me, it felt like a true celebration. Finally, I could be the actual lady of the house, no more dreading the sound of a key in the door that wasn't mine. Nathan was thrilled, too, though I could tell deep down he still wondered, "Why didn't you just tell me?" I tried to explain, because of his mom. He understood, but a part of him still held on to that little sting of hurt. Margaret, on the other hand, was clearly not happy. She called a few times asking, "So, when can I come see your new place? I'm curious, you know." I kept dodging her. "Oh, the renovation isn't finished. We're too busy. Nathan's working late." But eventually Nathan said we should just invite her over and be done with it. He believed hiding would only make things worse. We needed to aim for at least a polite peace. So the day came. Margaret arrived, looked around, and as expected, opened with criticism. "Well, this place is spacious, Victoria. But isn't it a bit flashy? That furniture looks expensive." It was already here. My grandmother lived here before. She had good taste, I replied, sticking to the truth. "And I bet the utility bills are sky high. Are you too sure you can manage?" "We're managing just fine, Mom," Nathan stepped in. "We both work. And have you thought, Victoria, if you have children someday, will this layout work? Maybe it needs to be redesigned." Redesigned? That was news to me. I saw Nathan roll his eyes. He hated it when his mother micromanaged. I kept my tone even. "The layout is fine. If we want to, we can turn the other room into a nursery. It's too soon to worry about that." "I see. So, you're not planning for children yet?" I realized this was her next pressure tactic. For Margaret, kids meant more control, telling us how to raise them, what to do. But Nathan and I had already decided we weren't in a rush. "We'll decide when the time is right," Nathan said firmly. "Let's just have some tea." Margaret pursed her lips, but held back. "All right, tea it is. I actually came with good intentions. Thought I'd bring you some things for the house. A tablecloth, maybe some curtains, but I figured you've already bought everything." Nathan smiled. "Thanks, Mom. We've got it covered." Apparently, she picked up on the subtle message that her offer of gifts, and with them, her quiet presence in our home, had been gently declined. Half an hour later, Margaret gathered her things and left, unable to find a single crack in our new life to wedge herself into. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Time went on. Things between Nathan and me were good. He'd tease me sometimes. "So, millionaire, how much did you rake in from rent today?" and laugh. I'd smile and shoot back. "Better question, how many academic papers did you publish?" Those little jokes showed how well we'd come to understand each other. But the peace didn't last long. As it turned out, Margaret had another plan up her sleeve. This time, to rope me into their family business. After retiring from the military, Nathan's father had started a small transportation company. They owned a few trucks and handled deliveries. Margaret helped with the books and wanted to grow the business. And for that, they needed investment. And where better to get money than from Victoria? After all, she had 3 apartments and rental income. Why let that go to waste? We're all family, they must have thought. One day, Nathan's dad stopped by and said, "Victoria, hear me out. We've got a great idea. We want to invest in a new truck, hire some more drivers, grow the business. It'll bring in good profit. You get a share of the earnings." "That sounds interesting," I replied politely, not wanting to offend him. "But I'm not ready to invest in the transport business. I don't know the field, and I'm not comfortable risking my savings without guarantees." "But it's a family business," he said, raising an eyebrow. "And I'm giving you my word. We are reliable people." "I don't doubt that," I said carefully. "But business can be unpredictable. We're just now settling into our own place, and we need funds for future expenses. For now, I'd rather not invest big sums." Unlike Margaret, my father-in-law was more reasonable. He simply nodded and said, "I understand, but if you change your mind, you know where to find us." But the very next day, Margaret called. "Victoria, what was that conversation with my husband? You refused to invest." "Yes," I confirmed. "I'm not ready to invest in something like that. But we're family. Is that how you treat your own? I'm not obligated to fund every project someone suggests just because we're related. Of course not. But families help each other. I'll help if someone's seriously ill or in a real emergency. But putting money into a business that might fail, that's not charity, it's risk." "You don't trust us?" Her tone sharpened. "I don't trust unverified investments. I'm sorry, but it's my decision." She hung up, and I knew what that meant. Another storm was coming. And I was right. Margaret started spreading the word that I was greedy, unwilling to support the family, hoarding my money for myself. I began hearing it from people I barely knew. "Why won't you help your husband's family?" I just waved it off. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my financial decisions. Nathan stood by me. He said it was my right. But even he couldn't stop his mother from talking. We started seeing her less and less. At family gatherings, she would pretend I wasn't even there, speaking to Nathan through me as if I were invisible. He hated it, but tried not to stir things up. I didn't want to escalate either, but deep down I knew things would probably stay like this. Margaret had lost her chance to control my money and my property, so now she just sulk and gossip. Life, however, has a way of putting things in perspective. The transportation business hit a rough patch, competition increased, and some legal issues cropped up. They had to dip into their savings and ended up with almost nothing. Margaret was furious, angry that I could have helped but didn't. Still, the truth was clear. If I had invested, we would have lost that money too. My doubts had been justified. Meanwhile, Nathan and I were building our life. We fixed up our apartment, started talking about the future. A year later, we decided we were ready for a child. I got pregnant, and we had a beautiful baby boy. We named him Paul. Of course, Margaret was thrilled to have a grandson. She rushed to the hospital with flowers, all smiles, pretending all past grudges were forgotten. But the moment I got home and started raising Paul my way, the old patterns returned. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. How I fed him, how I dressed him when I took him outside. And then the hints began again. "Maybe you could let us stay in one of your apartments while we're struggling? We could rent it out, rebuild the business, and pay you back later." "Mom, stop," Nathan cut in. "We're not discussing this." That was the moment my grandmother's advice finally came into full clarity. "Don't tell anyone about the apartments, no one but your husband, and only once you're sure of where he stands." If his family starts pressuring you, stay silent as long as you can. In the end, I didn't stay silent forever, but I held the line long enough to keep control over what was mine. And because of that, I held on to control over my life. I guess you could say that's where our story ends. But in family dramas, nothing really ends forever. Still, here's the point. I got married, didn't mention the inheritance. A week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary trying to lock me into a contract. I said nothing, and that silence protected my property. Later, when the truth came out, Nathan stood by me. We went through fights, tension, and plenty of drama, but our love held firm. And my status as a daughter-in-law with 3 apartments, that stayed mine and mine alone. Today, we're just living our life, raising our son. I'm still working in consulting. Nathan's still at the university. Margaret still tries to interfere now and then, but Nathan and I handle things as a team. We don't let her cross boundaries, but we do our best to show respect for her role as Nathan's mother and Paul's grandmother. Looking back, I don't regret hiding the truth. Maybe I should have told Nathan sooner, but at the time, I saw how hard it was for him to stand up to his mother, and I truly believe our relationship might not have survived that early storm. We needed time to become stronger, more grounded in who we were as a couple. And we got there. No notary, no manipulation, no amount of pressure from Margaret could break what we built together. In that, we were stronger than she ever expected. And now when I think back to that day, the doorbell ringing, and Margaret standing there with a notary, I smile. Good thing I kept quiet, I sometimes say to myself. And I know deep down that my gut was right. Yes, honesty is important in marriage. But when you're dealing with a family that can be overbearing and manipulative, sometimes silence, at least at first, can protect everything you've built. Now, Nathan and I have no secrets between us, and that's what matters. As for Margaret, she has her own path. Maybe one day she'll accept my choices. And if not, well, we've learned how to live without her approval. So, this is a story about boundaries, about how sometimes those boundaries take the shape of 3 apartments left behind by a wise grandmother, and how silence, when used wisely, can save a family from disaster. It might sound like a paradox, but it's the truth of my life. And if there's a lesson here, it's this. Don't rush to show all your cards. Wait until you're sure the person beside you values you, not what you own, and that their family won't try to use your trust against you. Of course, our journey isn't over. We're raising a son, thinking about having another child, continuing our careers. Margaret, though she's calmed down a lot, is still not an easy person. Every now and then, she'll have a flare of jealousy or try to control something. But now I know how to handle it. I calmly say, this is our family. We're happy to hear your advice, but the decision is ours. The most surprising part is that after her surgery, she started talking to me like a friend. Maybe she finally realized life is too short to waste on fights and power games. One day, she even told me, "You know, Victoria, when I was young, I had a terrible relationship with my own mother-in-law. She always criticized me for not earning enough, for being bad at housekeeping, and I guess I absorbed that pattern. I thought it was normal to tell the younger generation what to do. It happens a lot," I sighed. "People tend to repeat what they grew up with, even when it hurt them." We were sitting in the kitchen having tea. Nathan and Paul were in the other room building something out of blocks. And for the first time, I didn't see Margaret as some all-powerful critic. I saw a woman who had faced her own fears and insecurities. "It's a shame it took me this long to realize," she said, looking out the window. "But thank you for giving me the chance to make things right." My heart softened, and I realized I was genuinely glad. Somehow, we had gone from being adversaries, or at least rivals, to being people who could talk, listen, and support each other when it mattered. As of now, life is calm. We're still living in my grandmother's apartment, which has truly become our home. Meanwhile, we've started building on our plot of land. Paul goes to kindergarten. This fall, he'll start a prep program for school. Margaret picks him up sometimes when we can't, and they found their own rhythm. Her special methods now just mean reading fairy tales together in the evenings. No more notaries showing up at our door. No one's trying to tell me how to spend my money. And on my end, I help my in-laws when I can, like the time we chipped in together to send them on a health retreat. I do it now not out of guilt or fear, but simply because I want to. Sometimes when I share old family stories, my friends ask, "Wait, your mother-in-law, the same one who used to be awful?" I smile and say, life changed and we changed with it. Most importantly, I learned to set boundaries and not let anyone cross them. That, I think, is the real outcome of this long story. My marriage to Nathan was tested by fire, from my inheritance to his mother's influence, and the way we made choices together. But we came through stronger, more united than ever. We share the same goal now, to live with love, raise our children, and build a home. My financial independence is still intact. I still rent out the last apartment, which gives me a safety net. Since Margaret recovered, she's let go of a lot of her illusions. She stopped believing money solves everything. She's come to see that what matters more is an honest relationship with her son and with me. That's the foundation we're trying to build on. Yes, we still see life differently, but the aggression and need to dominate are gone. Sometimes I think back to those early days after the wedding, the very beginning, when Margaret showed up with a notary and demanded a prenup. I think how differently things could have turned out if I'd folded then, or if I'd fought back too hard. Thankfully, I had the sense to stay quiet at the right moment, to protect what was mine, and to find a balance between independence and keeping peace in the family. I suppose you could call this a happy ending. No fairy dust, just a good, real-life kind of ending, the kind that feels earned. Looking ahead, we're planning to lay the foundation for our house next year. If we manage the budget wisely, maybe in a couple of years, we'll have the walls and roof up. Or it might take longer, and that's okay. The main thing is we're doing it together, with no pressure from anyone. Sometimes I catch myself smiling, imagining us in our future home, sitting by the fireplace. Margaret's there, too, peacefully chatting with me about garden flowers. Maybe she'll bake pies and tell Nathan how sweet Paul was as a kid, while Paul rides his bike through the yard. No more notaries, no more ultimatums, just a family. Of course, life doesn't guarantee smooth sailing. New challenges will come. But I've learned the most important lessons. Protect your boundaries. Learn to say no and still stay kind. And if someone asks me, what's your biggest secret? I'd probably say know when to keep quiet about your money and know when to give it freely, especially if it can save someone. That's the tricky art of family, where everyone deserves their own space, but no one forgets what it means to show up for each other. So yes, our story has been a journey. It started with that fateful knock at the door in the first week of our marriage. And now we have reconciled relatives, a son, and plans for the future. A lot could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And I can say with full confidence, when I got married, I didn't mention the 3 apartments I inherited from my grandmother. And thank God I kept quiet, because just a week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary. That chapter is over now. Ahead of us lies a bright, wide-open future. One where we're no longer opponents, but a family. So after hearing all of that, I'm truly curious. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have told Nathan about the inheritance sooner, or was keeping it quiet the right move in the beginning? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think.